Last week's English Open snooker represented the first proper tournament on the UK soil this season, and as is so often the case, the tournament provided plenty of talking points for us to go through in this Snooker Digest episode this week. And we'll start with the 147s made by both Ali Carter and Aaron Hill during the tournament, meaning we have already had 10 maximum breaks so far this season. What this means is that despite only being in September, this season is set to potentially smash the record number of maximums made in a single campaign. That record was set last season with 15 being made, which beat the previous record of 13, which has happened 3 times in the 2016-17, 22-23 and 23-2024 seasons. Now, the slightly cynical view amongst some fans may be that this highlights an increase in pocket sizes on the professional tour, something that has been a point of concern for a while now. But I would prefer to look at a positive, and this is the 147 breaks are being made all the way down the rankings now. And it's not just the world's best players making maximum breaks like it used to be 10-15 years ago. And on the similar topic of century breaks, Judd Trump took his career tally up past 1,100. And I think it's worth pointing out that Judd reached his 1,000th century on the 27th of September 2024. So just under a year later, he has gone and added 100 more to his tally. Not that it's any secret, but this just underlines how prolific this man's break building really is. He is still 200 behind O'Sullivan, but with the rate that he is making them, I wouldn't discount him being the first man to make 1,500 career centuries. And I think it's pretty much nailed on that he's going to go on to go and reach at least 2,000 by the end of his career. And the only real negative with Judd is that he hasn't quite hit his usual consistent high standards so far this season. He hasn't made it to a single ranking event quarterfinal yet, with his one and only semi-final coming at the Invitational Shanghai Masters. And he is yet to pick up silverware in the entirety of 2025, with his last title coming at the UK Championship last year. And even he has admitted himself that he was on edge to get a tournament under his belt. But for most players, a 9-month trophy drought wouldn't really be that concerning, and it just goes to show the incredible rate that he was winning titles. And his game still looks in pretty good shape to me, so I suspect it's just a matter of time before he puts things right. But now let's start looking at players who did have successful weeks, and we'll start with Elliot Slessor, who continued his fine start to the season. Having already received £200,000 for reaching the semi-finals in Saudi Arabia about a month ago, Elliot then beat Judd Trump and Gary Wilson to reach the quarterfinals last week. The only downside was Elliot was 4-0 up on Mark Allen in that quarterfinal before losing 5-4, and he did have plenty of chances to get that match won as well, particularly in the deciding frame. Still though, Elliot is 4th on the one-year list and now up to 23rd in the live rankings, so he can possibly start setting his sights on a top 16 seeding. And then we've also got Aaron Hill, who has already been mentioned at the start of this video for his 147 break that he made at the beginning of the week. He also had a very good tournament, beating Stephen Maguire, Jack Lazowski and fellow maximum man Ali Carter to equal his best ever tournament performance by reaching a quarter-final. And this also builds upon his win against Kyren Wilson at the Wuhan Open a few weeks ago. So just like Elliot Slessor, this has been a very promising start to the season for the Irishman. And not to take credit for something that has nothing to do with me whatsoever, but I did have Aaron down as my player to watch in my preview of the season. There were also a couple of good runs for the 2023 World Champion and the 2024 Crucible runner-up. Starting with Luca, he had missed quite a few of the early tournaments this season, unfortunately citing on social media that he had been struggling with his mental health and he needed some time to put that right. And on evidence of last week, he might be on the right path to doing just that. Beating players like Hussein Fafai and Si Shaiwi will have done him no harm at all. And I think I speak for most when I say I hope this is the start of a comeback for him, because I do think snooker is all the better when a player like Luca Brecel is fully fit and fully firing. And then also Jak Jones, he reached the semi-finals, and that was a much needed run for the Welshman. Reaching the final of the Worlds 2 seasons ago did unexpectedly catapult him up into the top 16, but that did seem to come a little too soon for him as he struggled throughout the majority of last season. This result from last week though has sent him back up to 20th in the world, so he is another man who could be targeting a master spot if he can start to find some consistency. And if we're on that topic, if we start looking at the live rankings, you'll see that Shaun Murphy, who had just been overtaken by Gary Wilson, has reclaimed his top 16 seeding by getting a round further than Gary did last week. His lead is only £1,000 though, so that is still a place very much up for grabs. And even though Shaun looked devastatingly good at the start of last week, he is yet to reach a quarter-final this season. But we'll finish as always by talking about the final, and so far this season, we have been treated to some real exciting finales to tournaments. This was the third final in a row that has gone to a deciding frame, following the Saudi Arabia Masters and the Wuhan Open. And then we could also look at the Shanghai Masters final, which also finished 11-9. So we've not been lacking in the excitement department so far. Zhou Yuelong made it to his fourth ranking event final of his career and was seeking a maiden title. But despite being whitewashed by Neil Robertson in the European Masters final 5 years ago, this may just have been the most painful defeat for him yet, seeing as he got to the cusp of the winning line following a fantastic comeback from 6-2 and 7-3 behind to lead 8-7. And at that point, you probably just about made him favourite, only to see Mark Allen come back at him and steal the title. Unfortunately for him, the statistic of losing 4 ranking titles puts him in the same sort of category as Jack Lazowski, as one of snooker's biggest nearly men. However, he still should be very proud of his efforts last week, beating Mark Selby, Luca Brecel, Barry Hawkins and Mark Williams en route to that final represents a very good tournament for him. The result also puts him back inside the top 32, which really is the absolute minimum that he should be. But it was ultimately Mark Allen who had his lucky stars shining on him last week to claim a 12th ranking title of his career, 7 of which have come in the last 4 years. And to say the victory needed a bucket load of bottle would be an understatement. After beating Scott Donaldson 4-1 in the first round, Mark then needed to win the next 5 matches in deciders to clinch the title. But not only that, he had to come from 3-0 behind to beat Ding Junhui 4-3. He then came from 4-0 behind to beat Elliot Slessor, and then 5-3 behind to beat Jak Jones 6-5, just to reach the final. And it's those sort of written in the stars moments that had you thinking that his name had to be on the trophy. And that of course was the case, and the title came after getting to the semis out in China a few weeks ago too. So after having a rather up and down season last time out, which didn't result in any silverware apart from that invitational event out in Saudi Arabia last December, the early signs this time around is that he could be back to the kind of consistency levels he was producing around 2023-2024. There will, I'm sure, still be question marks and indeed criticisms around the style of play that he has adopted over the past few years, but again, that style of play is winning him titles. And one thing you definitely cannot fault about this man is his inability to know when he's beaten. That is a trait that he has had his whole career. There's nothing changed about that. And again, he demonstrated that last week to add more silverware to his trophy cabinet. And yeah, those are the main talking points from last week's action. And the snooker doesn't stop. We've got another tournament starting today at the British Open. Mark Selby, defending champion. And this tournament's really interesting because yes, it's sort of the best of 7 format that I'm not a fan of. But it is a random draw, so it's not the tiered system that most tournaments follow. So you could have some bizarre matchups from round 1. I think next week you've got something like Kyron Wilson against Chris Wakelin first round, which is a great match. So yeah, plenty to look forward to, and I will of course be back next Monday at the next Snooker Digest episode to see how it all unfolds.